Well, with so much music released last week, I'm still playing catch up and I still got lots to cover. So, next week and probably the week after that, we'll be still dealing with some of those releases from last Friday, as well as some releases that came out this current Friday. So, yeah, let's dive into one that I was, moderately excited for and then got really excited after I listened to it. So, let's dive into it.
You are everyone, you are me. You are everyone, you are free.
True by John Anderson. And before we get started, yes, I know that is a horrible album cover. I don't know what John was thinking, but if you look back on some of the album covers that John has put out in the past, we're not dealing with the absolute worst. I mean, we're definitely a far cry from Elias of Sun Hollow, but yeah. So true. The latest album from John Anderson. John Anderson was the lead singer, songwriter-ish of Yes. He departed from the band in the early 2000s. I believe the last record he was on was Magnification, because I don't think he was on Fly From Here or Return Flight. And since then, and even prior to that, he has put out, 5, 10, 15, 16. This is his 17th studio release under kind of a John Anderson solo moniker. So after Yes, he came out with The Fellowship in Elven Lands in 2006, Anderson and Wakeman, The Living Tree in 2010, Survival and Other Stories also in 2010, took a little bit of a hiatus and came out with Thousand Hands Chapter 1 in 2019, and I actually really enjoyed that record. It had some really interesting moments on it. It was more of like a concept of, even though John Anderson was like the driving force and the main, person behind it, it was really like the Thousand Hands lifting everybody up. So it was a little bit more of a collaborative enterprise, and I wonder if we'll get chapter 2 anytime soon. I don't think we necessarily will, because my boy is not getting any younger. I think he just turned like 80. So yeah, now we're on to John Anderson and the band Geeks with True. First thing I want to get at with this album right off the get-go, two things that it has going for it that I absolutely love. First thing is the structure. We've got just under an hour worth of music across 9 tracks. We've got 2 tracks that are a little bit longer, Counties and Countries, as well as Once Upon a Dream, both being about 10 minutes and 16 and a half minutes respectively. Love that. Quick, it's not overly too long. There's some really meaty moments on this one. A little bit of a return to form in terms of a prog stylings within John that I really, really appreciate. The other thing that I really, really appreciate about this is how much John Anderson is able to infuse this Yes style of music and like the signatures that make a Yes track and a Yes album prominent is found on here. Sure, you have John Anderson's vocals that haven't aged a day. Like, holy geez, I'm listening to it and I'm like, with so many other vocalists that are this late in their career and their voice is just disintegrating, his sounds like it could have been left right off of the Yes album. It's like it sounds exactly like it did back in the 70s. And whatever my man is doing, he's got to continue to do it because it sounds pristine. Along with that, we also get some really staple Yes stylings. And the one that I really want to shout out is the backing vocals that might actually be done by John Anderson himself, because I don't see anybody from the band Geeks doing backing vocals, but it sounds just like Chris Squire. It sounds the exact same way that Chris would harmonize with John, and the way that their two voices just meld together. It's slick as butter, because if you listen to some of the demos that Yes did back in the 70s and it's just the John Anderson run, it doesn't sound great. It's missing that je ne sais quoi that Chris would bring to the harmonizations. And whatever John is doing in order to mimic and create that is just amazing as well. And speaking about Chris Squire, I really want to talk about the bass work on here. 2 people are credited with bass. Richie Costello, I believe is how he pronounces his name, and Andy Grisano, I also believe that's how you pronounce his name. Their 2 bass works mimic Chris's licks within the bass, which is extremely, extremely hard to do because Chris had such a signature sound, and I wouldn't want to try to emulate that without really, really mastering the instrument. And both of these boys, trading back and forth, do a very good job of honing in on his style and, really creating that signature sound. I also want to shout out some of the keyboard players. Again, we have Rob Kipp and Chris Clark, both as keyboardists on here. Rob is also doing a little bit of double duty within the guitars. But what I love is that they're able to channel a Rick Wakeman style every once in a while, but also some of the other keyboardists within Yes without either completely stealing their style, like I'm thinking of a Tony Kaye, of their styles within the keyboard work to create that signature Yes. So I really appreciate that. And Andy Asoles, I believe is how you pronounce his name, maybe Asoles, on the drum works. Great job. I mean, he's definitely not pulling a Bill Bruford, but he's definitely honing in more of that Alan White powerhouse on there. So that's the band. That's everybody that's playing through here. I will say with the duo of Rob Kipp and Andy Grazinio on the lead guitar, I don't feel as if any of them kind of reached those same heights as a Steve Howe, but I don't think that's really what would have been fitted on here. The overall musical stylings on here kind of is both a reflection as well as an emulation of Yes, but never an imitation or a carbon copy of Yes as well. You can definitely tell like this is a John Anderson work from start to finish that happens to lean on the styles that he's very comfortable in playing in, and it services the music very well. So let's actually talk about the music on here. I've talked about the flavors and the overall structure and everything like that. This album is quite fun from start to finish. There's no track on here that I feel grates a little too much. The two opening tracks are bangers in terms of very punchy, very immediate Yes stylings. True Messenger feels something off of Going for the One or one of the better tracks from like a Tornado. Shine On feels like something that we would get from a Big Generator or 90125. Very prominent, very 80s in its sounding without it being derivative or lackluster. I'm not a big fan of the 80s style of Yes. Trevor Rabin was not my favorite guitarist in that kind of sense, but I still enjoyed kind of the bigger sound that Yes was bringing to the table. Counties and Countries being the first mini epic on here does a great job of kind of showing what prog music can do in this century and even in this decade, where I feel like, I don't know, we're getting copies of copies that it's so refreshing to hear a master of the craft coming back and really stretching his legs to showcase this is how you build up a song. This is how you construct one of these types of songs. You put down the solid foundation, you build up the house, and then you explode it. Unfortunately, I will say the mid portion of this, Build Me on an Ocean, Still a Friend, and Make It Right, these three tracks for me don't really add too much to the album, but at the same time, I'm never brought out of the album. I'm never bored. I'm never like running to turn off the radio. It's just kind of like the usual John Anderson, very pleasant, very happy, very celebratory styles of the symphonic prog music that I particularly like. There's not a whole lot of ebb and flow, but I at least really enjoy the sounds that they're setting down with this. It really isn't until Realization Part 2 that we feel some more of that like very intimate moments within John Anderson, and this is definitely found on the last track of Thank God, which is a reflection of his wife and how much that love brought him together, and that's really what life is all about. We're no longer talking about these big space epics or these massive concept records. We really get distilled down into the essence of what John has always written about, which is love and spreading love, and like life is love, and we need to celebrate that, and it's the connection through other people that brings us together. And that celebration is, you can't help but feel it. You can't help but be moved by it. So I really enjoy those two tracks. And right smack dab in the middle on the 8th track is Once Upon a Dream. And again, we're getting some classic Yes styles of the build-ups. This is where the Awaken from Going for the One or Revealing Science of God from Tales of Topographic Oceans. We've got that big build-up, that big meaty sounds. It's always celebratory. There's no rough edges. There's not a minor key to be found. It's very celebratory, and it's immediately infectious. And it made me want to come back time and time and time again. Like, I found myself all throughout last weekend just returning to this album, even though there was like 15 albums that dropped last week. And I just found myself coming back to this one because it felt like a warm hug. It really felt like coming home to a genre that I missed so much because, as I mentioned before, we're getting copies of copies of copies. So it's so good to feel this original master coming back into a sandbox that he's so well crafted and well known in, really playing extremely well in. So what can I say? What can I say? This isn't necessarily like a groundbreaking record. You know, it's not breaking the mold in any way. It's not earth shattering, but it is an extremely pleasant time for a lover of progressive rock. If you're a lover of prog, especially the prog from the 70s, you got to go out and listen to this record. It's just an absolute treat. It's essentially like a homecoming for me. So I think my final rating of this album will be True by John Anderson. It's an album I would absolutely pick up in physical format. The only thing I would probably change about this record is some of those tracks in the middle, like Still a Friend, Build Me an Ocean, and Make It Right. I would either cut or change a little bit so that we got about like a 45-minute record rather than, 58 minutes. So it's going to be harder to put on a single record, like a single LP, which is begging for this record to be listened to. You know, this is the kind of record that I would want to put on a turntable, drop the needle, and just get washed away within the sounds, but I don't want to have to do it across 2 records, you know? So I almost wish they cut a couple of tracks on here, tightened it up a little bit more, and we would have gotten one of the best Yes albums in a very long time. This one gets the notes of approval. I think you will have a great time with it, and I definitely did, and I'm going to continue enjoying this throughout the year. So that's what I got for True by John Anderson. What did you guys think about this record? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Don't let the front cover of this album persuade you away from this record. That is the worst part about this record, is the Photoshop is my passion stylings on there. So if you can get past that, you'll have a good time. But that's where I'm going to leave you. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.